Nobody calls a tow truck on a good day. Every hook, every winch out, every 2 a.m. flatbed run begins the same way. Somewhere in the dark, something went wrong, and a stranger in a truck is sent to the exact spot where it happened. Tow drivers see the roads the way coroners see the body, after. These 3 stories are about the calls that were still happening when the truck arrived. "14 years of nights on a rural interstate contract taught me that the job description is a lie. They tell you you move broken cars. What you actually do is arrive at the worst hour, on the worst shoulder, in the worst weather, and become, for one stranded stranger, the entire arriving world. That's the job, being what shows up. And on a February night at 1:40 a.m. at mile marker 61, I learned exactly how much can depend on what shows up first. The call was routine to the letter. Female motorist, sedan, dead alternator by the sound of it, on the pull-off by the old way station, a dark little apron of cracked asphalt everybody uses and nobody maintains. Dispatch relayed what she'd told them. She was alone, she was fine, doors locked, and she'd wait in the car. Standard advice, and smart. A locked car on a dark highway is a bunker, and we tell people, stay in it, hazards on, wait for the hook. I was 11 minutes out. I want that number on the record, because the whole story lives inside it. I rolled onto the pull-off at 1:51 with my beacons going. You announce yourself in this business. Amber light is a language. And the sedan sat exactly where dispatch said. Hazards on, engine dead, and empty. Doors locked, phone glowing face up on the driver's seat, purse on the console, the 2 objects no woman leaves a locked car without, sitting inside it like a museum display. And no driver. You develop a stomach for scenes in this work, a fast read. This read wrong in every direction at once. People walk for gas. They don't lock their phone inside first. And then there was the other thing my headlights had swept on the way in, the thing my brain had filed under normal for exactly 4 seconds before refiling it. A pickup parked 150 feet up the pull-off in the deep dark past the weigh scales. Lights off. Not abandoned, I'd seen the exhaust. Somebody sitting in a cold, dark truck at 1:51 in the morning, running the engine just enough to stay warm. Positioned, I understood this all at once, the way you understand a chessboard, between the sedan and the road. Here's what 14 years does for you. It doesn't make you brave, it makes you procedural. I did not walk toward the pickup. I did 3 things in 30 seconds in this order. I put my rig crosswise behind the sedan, a 7,500-pound wall of steel and amber strobes blocking the lane of the pull-off, making the geometry of the whole scene about me. I hit the work lights, the big rear floods, the ones that turn midnight into an operating room, and swung them up the apron so the pickup went from a shadow to a photograph. And I keyed my radio and told dispatch in the flattest voice I own to send county now. Motorist missing from a locked vehicle, suspicious vehicle on scene, and I read the pickup's plate out loud, slow, twice, with my window down. Loud enough to be heard 150 feet away. The pickup's headlights came on before I finished the second read. It pulled out past me, not fast, nothing panicked. Men like that leave the way they arrive, smooth, unremarkable. And I got a 2-second look at the driver as he passed through my floods. 40s, ball cap, face turned carefully away, one hand lifted in the little thanks buddy wave that people use to look ordinary. And then he was southbound and gone, and the night got 20 degrees quieter. And from the tree line beyond the guardrail, maybe 40 feet from the sedan, a voice said, "Is he gone?" She'd been in the brush for 25 minutes, in February. No coat. The coat was in the car. You don't dress for the outdoors when your plan is a locked sedan. What happened as she told it to me, wrapped in my emergency blanket in the cab, and later to the deputy in almost the same words, was 10 minutes after she called for the tow, the pickup had pulled on to the apron, slow, lights off as it stopped. The man inside hadn't gotten out, hadn't rolled down a window, hadn't done one single thing she could have reported. He'd just parked in the dark, facing her car, and sat, engine idling, for 10 minutes, while she watched him in her mirrors and felt the bunker turn into a display case. What made her run, and listen to this instinct, everyone, it is older and smarter than all of us, was when he'd finally eased the truck forward, stopped again, 30 feet closer, and shut off the engine. The engine, she kept repeating. When the engine stopped, I knew. Warm is waiting. Quiet is coming. She was over the guardrail with her keys fob-locking the doors behind her before the pickup's door ever opened. If it ever opened, she didn't look back to see. The county deputies found the pickup's plate came back to a man with 2 prior stalking charges and a suspended license, and what they could charge him with amounted, as always, to almost nothing. Sitting in a truck is not a crime, and the space between what men like that do and what the law can hold gets people killed every year. But the deputy who took her statement told me at the diner a month later that I've carried since. They'd pulled the man's phone records for that night. He hadn't called anyone, but at 1:12 a.m., 12 minutes after her breakdown, 2 minutes after her tow request went out over the commercial channels, he'd opened a scanner app. He'd heard the call, her location, her situation, alone, the wait time, my 11 minutes. He hadn't found her by chance. He'd been shopping, parked somewhere on that interstate, listening to the night's breakdowns like a wolf reading a menu, and my dispatch had read her out over open air, and he'd simply driven to where the herd had left one behind. They encrypted our dispatch channel the next year, statewide eventually. It's in the training now. I know because I give the training. Never broadcast a stranded motorist's status as alone. And every February, when the new drivers ask why the protocols are so paranoid, I tell them about the 11 minutes and the locked car glowing like a lantern with her phone and her purse inside, and how the difference between a rescue and a recovery that night was 140 seconds, and a woman who understood what a stopping engine meant. We move broken cars. That's the job description. Read the scene. That's the job.
Every tow yard has regulars, the landlord with the deadbeat tenants, the diner with the tiny lot. Ours had Mr. Aldery, and for 6 years Mr. Aldery's job was the strangest steady work on our books, and nobody, not the owner, not the office girls, not one driver, ever asked him a single question about it. This story is about why, and about the day we finally understood what we'd been part of. The job was always the same, a 1987 GMC pickup, faded blue, that did not run, had not run by the look of the engine bay in decades, parked in the side lot of what used to be Kepler's machine shop on Route 9 at the edge of town. Every few months, Mr. Aldery would call, always a Thursday, always polite, always cash, and we'd send a flatbed to Kepler's, load the blue GMC, and drive it 11 miles out to his farm and unload it in front of the barn. That's it. That was the whole job. And then 4 or 5 months later, he'd call again, and the truck would be back at Kepler's, in the same spot in the side lot, and we'd tow it home to the farm again. How did it get back to town? We never knew. He never said. He paid somebody else, we guessed, another yard, a neighbor with a trailer, to bring it in quietly, just so he could hire us to bring it back out. Backwards work, paying twice to move a dead truck in a circle, year after year. The new drivers would come back from an Aldery one with their faces full of questions, and the old drivers would say the thing that passed for an answer in our yard. It's his money, drive careful with that one. And here's the detail I want you to hold. Drive careful with that one. Nobody ever said why, but every driver on every Aldery run drove that flatbed like the cargo was crystal, strapped at 4 points when 2 would do, took the long way past the school zone. Some jobs teach you their weight without telling you what's in them. I did 9 Aldery runs over the years. He'd always be waiting at the farm gate in a clean shirt, like a man expecting company. He'd watch the unload, every second of it, hands folded, and when the GMC was down and I'd hand him the paperwork, he'd always touch the truck's hood once, lightly, the way you'd touch a sleeping child's hair, and say the same words, "Thank you for getting him home safe." Him. I noticed the word my first run and never mentioned it in 9 years. You don't ask a man in a clean shirt at a farm gate why his truck is a him. Mr. Aldery died in March, '89, and in April a woman called the yard, his daughter, out of state, settling the estate, and asked hesitantly if we were the ones who moved Dad's truck, and could she come by because she'd found something in his papers. She sat in our break room with a folder and told us, and I want you to have the story the way we got it, all at once, standing around a coffee machine going cold. In 1979, Mr. Aldery's son, Daniel, 19, worked at Kepler's machine shop. His pickup, the blue GMC, 1 year old then, his first truck, bought with his own summer money, broke down in the side lot on a Thursday in October. No cell phones in 1979. Daniel left it in the lot and started walking the 11 miles home along Route 9 in the dusk. 4 miles in, a drunk driver drifted onto the shoulder. Daniel never made it home. The truck sat at Kepler's for 3 weeks while the family drowned, and then Mr. Aldery had it towed to the farm, the first tow, the original tow, 40-some years before I ever touched a winch, and parked it by the barn, where his boy could have seen it from his bedroom window. The daughter found the ledger, her father's own handwriting, 40 decades of it. Every few months, all those years, he had paid a man, a different name in the early pages than that man's son in the later ones, to haul the GMC into town and leave it in the side lot at Kepler's, in the spot, Daniel's spot, and then Mr. Aldery would wait a day or a week. The ledger shows he sometimes drove past it every evening. There's a column checked on him with little ticks, and then he'd call a tow company and pay full price, cash, to have his son's truck brought home safe along Route 9. The 11 miles Daniel never got to finish, past the 4-mile mark, past the shoulder, all the way to the farm gate, where a father stood in waiting in a clean shirt to watch his boy come home, over and over, every few months for 40 years, because the one time it mattered, nobody had been there to make the trip. The room was very quiet. The office manager, who is not a soft woman, left it, and the daughter said the last thing, the thing she'd really come to say. The estate sale was next month, the farm was being sold, and the GMC was currently, she'd checked, parked at what used to be Kepler's, because her father had died mid-ritual, truck in town,
trip unfinished. She wanted to hire us one last time. She tried to hand us cash, the way he always had. The owner wouldn't take it, and on a Thursday in May, we did the last Alderey run with every driver in the yard, 4 rigs, though the job needed 1, running Route 9 in a line with our ambers on like a procession, because that's what it was. We brought the blue GMC home safe, 11 miles, slow through the 4-mile stretch, and unloaded it at the farm gate one last time. The daughter touched the hood the way her father used to. It goes to a cousin in Montana who knew Daniel. It will never be sold. I've been asked what the horror is in this one. People want the ghost, and I tell them there's no ghost. That's the horror. There was just a man for 40 years standing at a gate, and a road that took 11 miles from a family and gave back 10. We got him home. Every time but once, and once was the only time it counted, and every trip after was a father refusing that to be the end of the story. Drive careful with that one. Now you know why.
Cedar Run crosses under Route 34 at a low concrete bridge, and twice a decade or so, when the rains come wrong, the creek rises up and eats a car. That's where this happened, in the 3rd week of a wet October, on a recovery call that started as the most routine kind of miserable and ended with me standing on a bank at 4 a.m. while divers told a county sheriff that a knocking sound had just closed a 31-year case. The call, single vehicle, hydroplaned off the bridge approach into the swollen creek, driver already out, walked away mercifully. The creek at that bend is only 6-7 feet in flood, and the car sitting nose down in brown water, needing a winch out before it became a navigation hazard. Wrecker work in water is slow and cold and procedural. Wade the line out, find your attachment points by feel, set the rigging, get behind the truck and let the winch do its patient arithmetic. I'd done Cedar Run pulls before. I knew the bank, knew the mud, knew the way the flood makes the whole night smell like a basement. I was chest deep, working the hook under the frame by feel, when I heard it. A knock, then 2 more. Dull, evenly spaced, resonant, the specific sound of a knuckle on sheet metal heard through water, which is a sound recovery guys know because we make it ourselves. You wrap the hull when you're working blind so your partner topside knows where you are. Knock, knock, knock. From behind me and below, downstream of the car I was rigging. I want to be careful and honest here because everything afterward depends on this minute. The driver was accounted for, on the bank, in a blanket, 30 feet from me. My spotter was topside at the winch. There was no one else in that water. And metal in a flood does knock. Debris taps hulls, current flexes panels, temperature pops seams. Every rational explanation existed, and I stood chest deep in moving brown water at 3-something a.m. and listened to knock, 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 patient, spaced, repeating, wrong, coming from a part of the creek where there was nothing but water. Except that every tow driver who works a river crossing hears the stories, and Cedar Run had one, old enough that I'd heard it as a rookie from a man who'd heard it as a rookie, that back in the early 90s, a local woman, young, a nurse, driving home from a night shift, vanished on a rainy October night, car and oar, somewhere between the hospital and her house, and the route ran Route 34. They dragged the obvious water. Nothing. The case calcified into the kind of story rookies get told. Drive the bridge slow in the rain. I finished my rigging. I pulled the flood car out clean. And then,
And my spotter will tell you I stood in the water an extra minute doing nothing, just listening. I did the thing that made the next part happen. I asked the deputy on scene, almost embarrassed, whether anyone had ever scanned the deep bend below the bridge, the undercut hole where the current digs under the far abutment, because that's where the knocking had come from, and the knocking, whatever it was, had sounded like it does when we do it, like someone working blind, kelling topside where they are. The county had a side-scan sonar unit 2 towns over for exactly these flood weeks. It came out at dawn, mostly, I think, because the deputy was young and the night was slow, and I had 14 years of face saying I wasn't a man who heard things. The bend below the bridge was 11 feet deep at flood, scoured out under the old abutment, like a pocket that 30 years of drought-season searches, wading with poles in 4 feet of summer water, had never reached, because the pocket only opens when the creek floods, and nobody searches a creek in flood. The sonar image, which I saw on a laptop on a tailgate as the sun came up, showed a car. Roof crushed, decades of sediment wedged nose down under the concrete overhang like something the bridge had swallowed and kept. It was her. I'll skip what recovery of a 31-year submersion involves, because her family doesn't need it in a video, and neither do you. The plates confirmed it inside a day, dental records closed it inside a week. The finding was the finding almost always is in these cases: a rainy night, a hydroplane, the same water that had tried to take my flood car that very evening, and a terrible pocket of geometry that hid her from 30 decades of people who never stopped wondering. No crime, no mystery in the end, except the cruelest one. She was 11 feet from the bridge the whole time. Her mother, who is in her 80s and still lives in town, told the newspaper that she used to park by that bridge some nights and talk to the creek because it was the last road he drove. She said the reporter noted she'd lost her husband on a road too, and that she was done wondering now, and that done wondering is a mercy nobody who hasn't waited 31 years can size. At the little service they held at the bridge, the town came, towns do. The pastor said the water gives back in its own time. Maybe. I'm a rigging man. I live downstream of maybe. But I'll tell you what I know. The 2 facts I've never been able to stack any way but one. The knocking came from the pocket under the abutment, where she was, and it came in the 1 week in 31 years when the flood had opened the pocket and put a man with a trained ear chest deep in the water beside it, a man who'd know that knock anywhere, because it's the sound our whole trade uses to say the only thing it ever means. I'm here. I'm down here. Come find me. We did, ma'am. I'm sorry it took so long. The winch-out was routine, by the way, the flood car, the one I was actually sent for. I have no memory of it at all. If you've made it this far, the next time you pass a wrecker on a night shoulder, ambers turning, hook down in the dark, slow down, move over, and know that the driver out there in the cold is reading a scene you'll never have to. Subscribe to the Hollow Dial, because time doesn't heal, it haunts. And if you've ever run a night hook, we want your story. Leave it in the comments. We are listening. And so is something else.